You think the court's going to take you seriously dressed like that?
A sharp laugh cut through the courtroom as the courthouse maintenance tech stood beside his daughter. A suited attorney leaned back, eyes scanning worn boots and oil-stained cuffs, confidence curling into mockery. Then the judge raised her gaze, just slightly, and the room shifted in a way no one noticed yet, because the laughter hadn't reached the man at all. By the way, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below. What was really happening beneath the surface wasn't a custody hearing. It was a test of who this system believed deserved dignity. The man didn't argue. He didn't flinch. He rested one hand on the back of his daughter's chair, steady as concrete, eyes fixed forward as if he'd been trained to wait out pressure rather than react to it. They mistook that calm for weakness. The attorney continued, voice louder now, savoring the imbalance. My client finds it difficult to believe a man who cleans public restrooms can provide a stable environment. More chuckles rippled. A clerk coughed to hide a smile. Even the bailiff shifted, uncomfortable but silent. The girl's fingers tightened around the strap of her backpack. He felt it through the chair, a small tremor traveling up his arm. That was the moment he exhaled, not in defeat, but in decision. He had stood in worse rooms than this, rooms where laughter meant nerves, not cruelty, rooms where mistakes buried people. Rowan Calder finally spoke when the judge asked his name. His voice was quiet, almost level with the hum of the lights. He spelled it carefully, as if each letter mattered. Somewhere behind the bench, a court reporter paused, then resumed typing. The hearing moved on, but the damage had already been done. The opposing counsel paraded reports across the screen, charts, signatures, technical phrases meant to sound airtight. According to them, Rowan was reckless. According to them, his daughter's fear stemmed from instability at home. According to them, money equaled safety. He listened, eyes narrowing not in anger, but in focus. The terminology was wrong. Not dramatically wrong, just enough. A pressure rating that didn't match the building's age. A timestamp that ignored a system upgrade from years back. Small lies, stacked neatly. When the judge recessed briefly, the room erupted in whispers. People glanced at him openly now, curiosity replacing laughter. A man like that shouldn't notice details like those. A man like that shouldn't understand them. In the hallway, a junior clerk brushed past and murmured, "You shouldn't push this." It sounded like advice. It sounded like fear. Rowan knelt in front of his daughter, lowering himself until they were eye level. "Hey," he said softly. "You okay?" She nodded, though her eyes flicked toward the courtroom doors, toward the people with power. "They're mad," she whispered. "No," he said gently. "They're scared they won't be believed." That wasn't something a janitor was supposed to say. When proceedings resumed, the attorney pressed harder, requesting immediate custody review for the child's protection. The words protection and removal sat too close together. Rowan felt the floor tilt, just a fraction. He steadied himself the same way he always did, by anchoring to facts. He requested permission to submit a procedural note. The attorney smirked. "Is this about cleaning schedules too?" The judge hesitated. "1 minute," she said. Rowan approached the evidence stand with a folded notebook pulled from his jacket. Its cover was frayed, pages soft with use. Inside were measurements, diagrams, dates. He didn't open it yet. He didn't need to. "I maintain this building," he said. "I know its systems. The report submitted references a structural sensor array that doesn't exist here." Silence landed heavier than laughter ever had. The attorney scoffed too quickly. "That's absurd." Rowan met the judge's eyes. If I'm wrong, I'll sit down. She studied him longer this time. Something in her expression tightened, not suspicion, but recognition she couldn't yet place. "Proceed," she said. He turned slightly, just enough for the gallery to see his hands. They were steady, not the hands of a man guessing. Somewhere in the room, a memory stirred. The judge felt it like a name on the tip of her tongue. And as Rowan began to explain what the report had gotten wrong, the balance of the room started to tip, quietly, inevitably, away from the laughter. The courtroom stayed unnaturally still as his explanation settled into the air, not dramatic enough to shock, too precise to dismiss. The judge leaned back slightly, fingers touching the edge of the bench, eyes never leaving him. The attorney cleared his throat, a sharp sound meant to reset control, but it landed flat. He was asked to clarify. He did, calmly, pointing out how the sighted sensor array belonged to a newer courthouse across the river, not this one. He explained it like maintenance. Plain, factual, no ego attached. The gallery shifted again, curiosity spreading in small ripples. People had stopped smiling. The judge called a short recess. Not the kind that signaled resolution, but the kind that meant something uncomfortable had entered the room. In the hallway, the tone changed. Conversations dropped when he passed. A pair of lawyers whispered near the vending machines, glancing at him like he'd crossed an invisible boundary. The junior clerk from earlier hovered by the records desk, pretending to organize files that were already aligned. His daughter sat on a bench, feet dangling, staring at the floor tiles. He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. The hum of fluorescent lights pressed down, familiar and grounding. "You did good," she said quietly, not looking up. He smiled, just a little. "So did you." Across the hall, Victor Halden arrived with the subtle disruption of wealth. Tailored coat, confident stride, people instinctively making space. He didn't look at Rowan at first. When he did, his eyes flicked over him and moved on, like a man dismissing a stain on glass. Halden spoke to his attorney in a low voice, irritation threading through the calm. Papers changed hands. A phone buzzed, then buzzed again. Whatever certainty they'd walked in with had cracked. If you're still here watching this unfold, subscribe with the bell on, because what happens next is exactly how quiet truth turns power inside out. The judge returned, expression tighter now. She asked for the report's author to be identified. The attorney answered smoothly, naming a consulting firm with an impressive resume. The judge nodded once, and then asked for the building's maintenance logs from the year referenced. That request landed harder. The clerk hesitated. "Those would be archived," he said. "I know," the judge replied. "Retrieve them." Eyes turned to Rowan again, different this time. No laughter, no smirks, just assessment. As the clerk hurried off, Halden finally spoke, voice polished but edged. "Your Honor, with respect, this line of questioning seems excessive for a custody matter." The judge looked at him evenly. When evidence integrity is questioned, it stops being excessive. Rowan felt his daughter's hand slip into his. He squeezed back once, grounding them both. Minutes stretched. When the clerk returned, arms full of binders, sweat darkening his collar, the courtroom leaned forward collectively. The logs were old, thick with handwritten notes and stamped forms. The judge allowed Rowan to approach again. He flipped to a marked page, one he'd memorized years ago. "This upgrade," he said, tapping the paper, "was completed after the date referenced in the report. Any data pulled from before would look different. This doesn't." The attorney objected. The judge overruled. Halden's jaw tightened. He leaned back, crossing his arms. the posture of a man unused to resistance. The judge asked a simple question then. "Mr. Calder, how do you know this?" He paused, not for drama, for accuracy. "Because I signed off on the upgrade." The room inhaled. The judge's eyes flickered, something old and sharp moving behind them. She studied his face again, longer now. "You said you maintained this building," she said slowly. "Yes. And before that?" Silence pressed in. Rowan didn't answer immediately. He wasn't supposed to. Not yet. Halden's attorney scoffed, trying to reclaim the moment. "Your Honor, this is irrelevant." "Sit down," the judge said, not raising her voice. Rowan finally spoke. "I used to do more than maintain." The judge's gaze sharpened. A memory surfaced. An audit years ago, after a quiet civic failure that never reached headlines. A name at the bottom of a report that had saved the city from worse. She looked down at the file again, then back at him. Recognition didn't explode. It clicked. The judge called for an adjournment until morning, voice firm, controlled. "This court will resume with full review." As people filed out, whispers followed him like a tide, not mocking now, measuring. He walked out, holding his daughter's hand, shoulders squared, unaware of something shifting beyond the case itself. The laughter was gone. In its place was uncertainty, dangerous for people who relied on certainty to stay powerful. Behind them, Halden stood still, staring after the man he'd dismissed, and for the first time, he wasn't sure who he was dealing with. The courthouse emptied in uneven waves, voices low, shoes echoing against stone that had heard centuries of certainty. He felt it shift as he walked, the building responding the way machines did when pressure changed. Not dramatic, just different. His daughter stayed close, eyes scanning faces that no longer looked past them. Outside the courtroom doors, a pair of attorneys stopped talking when they saw him. One offered a stiff nod, the kind reserved for people suddenly deemed relevant. He returned it without slowing. Relevance had never been his goal. They moved toward the service corridor instead of the main exit. Habit guided his feet. The narrower hallway smelled faintly of cleaner and old paper, the comfort of familiar work. He checked his watch, then the door at the end of the hall that led to record storage. Still locked, still off limits. For now. A voice called his name, just his last name this time. He turned to see the junior clerk jogging toward him, breath slightly uneven. "They're upset," the clerk said, as if that explained everything. He nodded. "They usually are when things don't line up." The clerk hesitated, glancing down the corridor. The judge ordered a full comparison. "Old logs, archived schematics. It'll take time." "I know," he said. Time was something systems always demanded. They parted there. He took his daughter outside, at the winter air sharp against their faces. She pulled her jacket tighter, then looked up. "Are we in trouble?" "No," he said after a beat. "We're just being looked at." That answer didn't comfort her, but it didn't scare her either. She trusted the steadiness more than the words. Across the plaza, a black car idled, engine humming softly. The window lowered just enough for a woman's face to appear, Halden's lead counsel, eyes cool, assessing. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she said. He stopped. Not defiant, deliberate. "I didn't make it this way." She smiled thinly. Custody cases don't usually involve infrastructure debates. Then someone shouldn't have used infrastructure to lie. The smile vanished. The window rolled up. The car pulled away. He exhaled slowly. That exchange confirmed what he'd suspected since the report first flashed on the screen. This wasn't sloppy work. It was copied work. The kind done by people who assumed no one present would know the difference. They went home on the bus. He watched reflections slide across the glass. Faces tired, hands rough, people who kept things running without being asked their names. His daughter leaned against him, asleep before they reached their stop. That night, after she was settled, he spread his notebook on the kitchen table. The pages were worn, corners softened by years of use. He ran his thumb over an old diagram, one he hadn't drawn in a long time. Buildings had patterns, so did lies. He compared dates, mentally overlaying systems. The report referenced load tolerances introduced after a retrofit that never happened here. A subtle mistake, but fatal if exposed correctly. He wrote a single word beside the margin: mismatch. Morning came too fast. Back at the courthouse, the atmosphere felt heavier. Reporters clustered near the entrance, drawn by rumors they didn't yet understand. Inside, the judge reviewed documents in silence while the clerk stacked binders like offerings. He sat, hands folded, posture easy. His daughter sat beside him, swinging her feet. The attorney began confidently, summarizing their position, emphasizing expertise, credentials, authority. Then the judge asked for clarification on one technical point. Just one. The attorney answered, wrong. Not wildly, just enough. He felt it then, the moment when the room leaned without realizing it. He requested permission to speak again. The judge granted it. He didn't lecture, he pointed. That specification belongs to a post-upgrade model. This building still runs the earlier configuration. The attorney objected, citing expert testimony. The judge asked for the expert's affidavit. The clerk hesitated again. That hesitation mattered. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Reporters scribbled. His daughter squeezed his hand once. The judge's gaze sharpened. "We will verify," she said. Verification was his terrain. The attorney tried to pivot, to reframe, but the foundation had cracked. The judge ordered an independent review and requested original source files, not summaries. Halden sat rigid now, confidence replaced by calculation. He leaned toward his counsel, whispering urgently. As the session adjourned again, the judge lingered, eyes on him. "Mr. Calder," she said quietly, "while you're aware this may widen." "Yes," he replied, "it already has." She studied him, then nodded once. Not approval, recognition of resolve. They stood to leave. The laughter from the first day felt distant now, almost absurd. In its place was something sharper. Scrutiny. As they walked out, he glanced once at the bench, at the seal carved into the wood. Systems failed when people assumed no one would check the details. He always checked. And this time, the whole court was going to watch. The attention followed him out of the courtroom like a current he couldn't step away from. Not loud, not aggressive, just present. He felt it in the way conversations paused, in the way people watched his hands as if expecting them to reveal something else. He kept them relaxed at his sides and guiding his daughter through the hall with the same steady pace he always used. The junior clerk caught up again near the stairwell, breathless. "They're asking for everything now," he said. "Original schematics, vendor logs, even off-site backups." "That's good," he replied. "Means they can't control the angle anymore." The clerk swallowed. "They're not happy." He almost smiled, almost. Security escorted them to a side exit this time. Outside, cameras waited. He angled his body just enough to shield his daughter, eyes forward, refusing to perform. Questions flew anyway, about qualifications, about his job, about why a maintenance worker knew so much. He didn't answer. Silence was safer than half-truths. The black car returned before they reached the bus stop. It rolled in smoothly, blocking the curb. The same woman stepped out, a coat immaculate, expression sharpened by impatience. "You're forcing a situation that doesn't need to exist," she said. "Think about your child." He stopped. That word was the lever. "I am," he said evenly. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You don't win these fights. You survive them if you're smart." He met her gaze. Then someone should have been smarter when they wrote the report. Her jaw tightened. Last chance. For what? To sit down? He shook his head once, not defiant, decided. She studied him for a moment longer, then turned back to the car. The door closed softly. The engine purred away. His daughter looked up. Was she mad? Yes. Are you scared? He considered the question. I'm careful. That answer satisfied her more than reassurance ever could. Inside the courthouse the next morning, the atmosphere had curdled. Power hates daylight. The judge reviewed fresh stacks of documents, face unreadable. An independent consultant had been brought in, neutral and visibly uncomfortable with the attention. Halden sat stiff, fingers interlaced, eyes cold. The consultant spoke. Slowly, carefully, confirming the mismatch. A murmur swept the gallery again, louder this time. The attorney objected, voice sharper, but the judge raised a hand. Enough. She turned to him. You maintained this building during the period in question? Yes. And before that? The question hung heavier now. Everyone leaned forward, waiting for the reveal they could sense but not name. He felt his daughter's presence beside him, grounding. He chose his words with the same precision he used on failing systems. Before that, I worked on buildings like this, designed them, audited them. The attorney laughed too quickly. Your Honor, be quiet, the judge said. She looked at him again, searching memory. You were part of the Calder review. It wasn't a question. He nodded once. Recognition settled fully now, not dramatic, just absolute. The Calder review had saved the city millions after a quiet collapse no one wanted to talk about. The name had been buried with the incident. Halden's composure cracked. This is absurd, he said. If he were who he claims. He is, the judge replied. And that makes this extremely serious. The room felt smaller, tighter. Reporters scribbled furiously. The consultant shifted, clearly aware of the implications. The judge ordered a temporary halt to the custody proceedings, pending a full investigation into evidence manipulation. And the words landed like a dropped gavel inside his chest. Not relief yet, but space. His daughter squeezed his hand again, harder this time. He squeezed back. Halden stood abruptly. You can't do this, he snapped. I can, the judge said calmly, and I will. As they left, no one laughed. No one whispered. People watched openly now, recalculating. In the stairwell, the junior clerk let out a shaky breath. They're calling it a scandal. He nodded. It's just sunlight. Outside, the air felt different, lighter. His phone buzzed, unknown numbers, missed calls. He ignored them all. At home that night, he sat at the table again, notebook open. He added one more note beneath mismatch. Exposure. This wasn't over. Not even close. But the balance had shifted. Power had looked where it never bothered to before. And it didn't like what it found. The judge's order didn't quiet the courthouse. It agitated it. Phones rang nonstop. Doors closed too softly. And people who usually moved with certainty now checked over their shoulders before speaking. He felt the building strain under the sudden attention, like an old bridge under unexpected weight. He stood in the records office with the junior clerk, both of them watching as sealed boxes were carried in from storage. Dust puffed into the air with each lid cracked open. The clerk wiped his palms on his trousers, nervous energy spilling out in small, sharp movements. These haven't been touched in years, the clerk muttered. "They don't need to be touched," he replied. "They just need to be read." They worked side by side, spreading documents across a long metal table. Old schematics, maintenance logs, vendor invoices. He moved through them with practiced ease, fingers tracing lines, eyes catching inconsistencies the way others caught spelling errors. This was familiar ground, comforting even. One document stopped him cold, a supplemental report. Same consulting firm, different project, different year. The formatting was identical, the language too. Only the building name had been swapped, copied. He slid it toward the clerk. "Look at this." The clerk's eyes widened as he scanned it. "They reused it." "Yes, that's intentional." "It is." The implication settled between them, heavy and undeniable. This wasn't corner-cutting. It was deception dressed as expertise. Across the hall, voices rose. Halden's counsel had arrived early, demanding access, demanding delays, demanding control. He ignored the noise and kept reading. Truth didn't need volume. When the judge entered the records office herself, the room froze. She didn't sit, she didn't speak right away. She simply looked at the spread of documents, at the way he'd arranged them, not chaotically but methodically, each piece placed to tell a story. "You found something," she said. "Yes." He explained it plainly, no accusation, no flourish, just comparison after comparison, each one tightening the net. The judge listened, eyes sharp, mind clearly racing ahead. "This will require formal submission," she said finally. "I know." She paused, then added, "You understand what this means?" "Yes." It meant this was no longer just about his daughter. It meant reopening a door powerful people had welded shut. If you're still watching this unfold, subscribe with the bell on, because this is the part where buried truths start pushing back. The next hearing was packed. Not just spectators now, but officials, journalists, people who understood the stakes. The consultant returned, pale but resolute. Halden sat rigid, the confidence he once wore like armor now visibly cracked. The judge allowed the supplemental report into evidence. Halden's attorney objected furiously. The judge overruled. He watched Halden closely then, saw the calculation behind his eyes, not panic, strategy. A man used to losing battles to win wars. The attorney pivoted, arguing technical irrelevance. He countered with one sentence. "If the report was copied, its conclusions can't be trusted." Silence followed. Not the uncertain kind, the damning kind. The consultant confirmed it after a brief review. "The structure of this report is identical," he said. "That shouldn't happen." The judge's voice was calm when she spoke. "Then we have a problem." The problem spilled outward immediately. Requests for subpoenas, motions for inquiry. The custody case faded into the background as something much larger took center stage. Through it all, he stayed where he'd always been, slightly to the side, never at the center unless pulled there by necessity. His daughter watched him with new eyes now, not fear, pride. During a recess, she whispered, "You're fixing it." He smiled faintly. "I'm just pointing at what's broken." Halden tried once more in private, cornering him near the service elevator. "You don't know what you're doing," he hissed. "This will burn everything." He met his gaze steadily. Then it shouldn't have been built on lies. Halden scoffed, but the sound rang hollow. Power sounded different when it knew it was being watched. When the session adjourned for the day, the judge announced a full investigation into evidence fabrication and undue influence. She also reaffirmed temporary custody arrangements in his favor, citing the child's well-being. Relief washed through him slowly, cautiously. Not victory, not yet. Outside, reporters shouted questions. He shielded his daughter again, moving through them without comment. Words could wait. Facts couldn't. That night at the kitchen table, he closed his notebook after adding one final line beneath exposure. Accountability. The system had finally looked down into its own machinery, and it was starting to see the rust. Morning brought rain, thin and persistent, tapping against courthouse glass like a metronome. He felt it before he saw it. The way pressure systems announce themselves if you know how to listen. Inside, the building hummed under early arrivals and late-night tension that never quite left. The judge convened the session without ceremony. No pleasantries, no patience for theater. Files were stacked higher now, tabs bristling like warning flags. The investigation had a shape, and it was no longer subtle. He stood when asked, posture easy, eyes steady. Across the aisle, Halden's counsel looked frayed, confidence replaced with something sharper and meaner. The consultant sat stiffly, hands folded, ready to answer for things he hadn't created. The judge asked about the supplemental report again. Not its existence, its origin. He explained where it came from, how it mirrored another project he'd audited years back. He didn't say the year out loud, he didn't need to, the judge already knew. What you're saying, the judge said carefully, is that this firm reused proprietary analysis. Yes, and falsified applicability. Yes. The words landed with weight. A reporter in the back stopped scribbling entirely. Halden's attorney objected on procedural grounds. The judge let him finish, then denied it without comment. Power doesn't like being corrected, but facts don't care. During a break, the junior clerk approached again, face pale. "There's more," he whispered. "Off-site backups came in." They moved to a smaller room, one meant for storage audits. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The clerk logged into a terminal, fingers shaking. On screen, directories bloomed open. Timestamps, file names, authorship metadata. There it was, a version history trail showing the report's creation, edits made in batches, copied sections flagged by the system. He pointed to a timestamp. This edit happened before the consultant was even contracted. The clerk swallowed hard. "Then who?" "Someone upstream," he said. "Someone with access." They exchanged a look that didn't need explanation. This was no longer about bad consultants. This was about influence. When they returned, the judge reviewed the digital trail in silence. Her expression didn't change, but something hardened behind it. "This court will expand the scope," she said, "immediately." Halden rose halfway from his seat. "This is a witch hunt." "No," the judge replied evenly. "It's a map." The word hung there, precise and devastating. His daughter sat quietly beside him, drawing circles on a notepad. When she looked up, her eyes searched his face. He nodded once. She went back to drawing. As the afternoon wore on, names surfaced. Not spoken aloud yet, but present in the way people avoided eye contact, in the sudden urgency of whispered phone calls. The consultant was dismissed pending review. Halden's counsel requested adjournment. Denied. At one point, the judge addressed him directly again. "You've been careful," she said. "Why now?" He considered the question. "Because it stopped being just about me." She nodded. Understanding settled between them, unspoken but solid. Outside the courtroom, the rain had intensified. He watched it streak down the windows during another brief recess, each line tracing a path gravity couldn't ignore. Systems behaved the same way under scrutiny. Halden tried one last time, catching him near the service stairs. "You think you're winning," he said softly. "You're just making enemies." He met his gaze. "Then they shouldn't have used my daughter as leverage." Halden's face flickered. For the first time, something like doubt crossed it. Then it was gone. The judge returned and made it official. Subpoenas authorized. Communications seized. The custody matter formally severed from the investigation, with protections ordered for the child. Relief hit him like a delayed wave. He steadied himself, one hand on the bench, grounding through contact. His daughter leaned into him, small and warm and real. As people filed out, no one spoke loudly. The air felt charged, brittle. The junior clerk exhaled shakily. "This is going to blow up." "Yes," he said, "but not sideways." That evening, at home, he opened his notebook again. He added dates, arrows, connections. The pattern was clear now, the way failures always were once exposed. He closed the notebook and set it aside. Discovery was over. What came next was preparation. And this time, the system wouldn't be able to pretend it didn't see him coming. The courthouse woke to itself the next morning. Not slowly, alert, braced, aware that whatever had been contained was now moving. He felt it in the way security checked badges twice, in the way clerks spoke in lowered voices, in the way people who once strode now measured their steps. He arrived early, habit pulling him through the service entrance instead of the front. The building smelled of cleaner and wet coats. Familiar, grounding. His daughter walked beside him, quieter than usual, eyes taking everything in. She'd learned that silence didn't always mean fear. Sometimes it meant listening. Inside, the junior clerk met them near the records office, eyes rimmed red from lack of sleep. "They're pushing back hard," he said. "Motions, appeals, procedural delays, everything at once." He nodded. "That's what happens when the margins disappear." The clerk hesitated. "They're saying you're biased, that you're retaliating. Of course they are." Bias was the last refuge when facts stopped cooperating. The judge convened a special session mid-morning. No jury, no spectacle, just process. Halden sat with a new attorney now, older, sharper, the kind who specialized in slowing things down until people forgot why they were angry. The switch told him everything he needed to know. The attorney argued scope, overreach. He claimed the investigation threatened unrelated projects and innocent parties. He listened carefully, not for persuasion, but for tells. The argument leaned heavily on urgency, on the need to act before irreparable harm occurred. Harm to whom was never specified. When the judge asked for rebuttal, he didn't speak right away. He waited, letting the silence do work. Then he stood, slow and deliberate. "The harm already happened," he said, "to public trust, to this court, to a child." Halden shifted. The word child still landed like a fault line. He outlined the sequence again, tighter now. Report creation, metadata trail, reuse patterns, influence points. He wasn't presenting new information. He was aligning it so no one could look away. The older attorney tried to interrupt. The judge stopped him with a raised hand. "This court will not rush clarity," she said. That was the moment he felt it. Resistance hardening into something else. Not surrender, exposure. During a recess, a marshal quietly repositioned themselves closer to Halden. Phones were collected, doors closed. The investigation had crossed an invisible threshold, from theoretical to real. His daughter sat with a coloring book, drawing careful lines. She looked up suddenly. "They're scared," she whispered. He followed her gaze. Halden stood apart now, posture rigid, eyes darting more than he realized. "Yes," he said softly. "They are." Preparation wasn't about speeches, it was about timing. He met briefly with the independent consultant again, clarifying points, anticipating counter-arguments. They mapped out how the reused reports would unravel under public scrutiny, not all at once, but inevitably. Patterns always spoke louder than accusations. If you want to see how this kind of truth actually lands when it's ready, stay with us. What's coming next is the setup before the fall. By afternoon, the judge announced that findings would be presented in open court within days. No closed sessions, no sealed summaries. Transparency enforced. That decision rippled outward immediately. Reporters moved from speculation to preparation. Phones buzzed harder. Somewhere upstream, damage control shifted to survival. Halden cornered him once more near the stairwell, voice low and urgent. "You think this ends well?" he demanded. "For anyone?" "It ends honestly," he replied. "That's the difference." Halden scoffed, but the sound lacked conviction. "You could have stayed quiet." "I tried," he said. "You didn't let me." The words landed harder than he intended. Halden stepped back, recalculating. The judge passed them on her way out, pausing briefly. "Be ready," she said to him. "They'll fight loudest when the lights come on." "I know." At home that night, he laid everything out on the table. Not papers, but sequences. He walked through the coming days in his head, identifying pressure points, failure modes, human reactions. Preparation wasn't fear, it was respect for complexity. His daughter watched him from the doorway. "Is it almost over?" He looked at her, really looked. "It's almost clear," he said. "That's better." She nodded, accepting that distinction with the wisdom only children had. He packed his notebook carefully, placing it by the door. Tomorrow wouldn't be about discovery. That phase was done. Tomorrow would be about standing still while the truth did its work. And when it did, it wouldn't need him to shout. It would speak for itself. Morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. He felt it in his chest before he opened his eyes, the same sensation that used to come before inspections no one wanted to pass. The truth was ready. That didn't mean people were. They entered the courthouse through the public doors this time. Cameras lined the steps, lenses tracking movement like heat seekers. He kept his daughter close, one hand light at her shoulder, guiding her through the noise without shielding her completely. She needed to see this part too. Inside, the gallery filled fast. Reporters, city officials, observers who suddenly remembered how much integrity mattered. The judge took the bench without delay. No small talk. No warnings. Just process. He sat and waited. Preparation meant knowing when not to speak. The presentation began with neutral facts, dates, documents, metadata projected cleanly onto the screen. The consultant explained reuse patterns, identical phrasing, structural impossibilities. Each slide tightened the air, each confirmation stripping another layer of denial away. Halden's new attorney tried to interrupt twice. The judge shut him down twice. Calmly, decisively. When it was time for corroboration, the judge turned to him. "You prepared an independent comparison," she said. "Yes." "Proceed." He stood, aware of the room's attention but not owned by it. He walked them through the notebook, not the whole thing, just enough. The stamped audit seal, the timeline, and the exact point where the copied report contradicted the building's physical reality. "This isn't opinion," he said evenly. "It's verification." Silence followed. Not stunned, absorbing. If you're still watching this unfold, subscribe with the bell on, because this is where quiet preparation finally meets the spotlight. Halden leaned forward now, knuckles white. When his attorney spoke again, the tone had changed, defensive, fractured. He argued intent, suggested administrative oversight, implied coincidence. The consultant shook his head gently. "Coincidence doesn't replicate structure." That was the line reporters would quote. He felt it land. The judge asked one final question, voice steady. Was this evidence used to influence a custody matter involving a minor? The attorney hesitated. That hesitation was the answer. Yes, the judge said, answering for him. It was. Her ruling followed without flourish. Findings entered. Evidence referred for prosecution. Protective orders reaffirmed. The custody issue formally resolved in favor of stability and safety. His daughter squeezed his hand, relief finally breaking through her careful composure. He squeezed back, grounding them both. Halden stood abruptly. "This is an ambush," he snapped. "No," the judge replied, "it's accountability." Security stepped closer. The room exhaled. As people filed out, the energy shifted again. Not confusion this time, but clarity. Conversations were louder now, sharper, directed outward. Power had lost the ability to whisper. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight cut through clouds, reflecting off glass and pavement. Reporters called his name. He didn't answer. Words could wait. His daughter looked up at him. "Did we win?" He considered it. "We stood," he said. "That matters more." They moved through the crowd, past cameras, past questions, into the open air beyond. Behind them, the courthouse doors closed, sealing in the reckoning. He knew what came next wouldn't be quiet. Investigations rarely were. But the hardest part, the standing still, was done. Truth didn't need him anymore. It had witnesses now. The aftermath didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the pause after a loud noise when ears rang and the body waited to see what would break next. He sensed it as soon as they stepped back inside the building days later. Anticipation layered over fear. Order stretched thin by too many eyes. They were no longer alone in the halls. Observers lingered where they didn't belong. Staff moved with rehearsed calm. The building had become a stage, and everyone knew the final act was coming. He kept to the margins where he'd always worked best. Preparation wasn't about being seen. It was about making sure nothing could be twisted once it was. The judge had ordered a full public presentation of findings. Not a summary, not a press release. Everything. That meant opportunity and risk in equal measure. Truth could still be buried under noise if it wasn't placed carefully. He met with the consultant again in a small conference room that smelled faintly of old coffee and toner. They reviewed the sequence one last time, aligning slides, matching timestamps, anticipating where the defense would try to fracture the narrative. "They'll claim it was delegated," the consultant said. "That responsibility was diffuse." "Then we show concentration," he replied. "Patterns don't diffuse." They refined the order, not dramatic, logical. Step by step until denial became irrational. In the hallway outside, voices rose. He caught fragments. Legal strategy, reputational fallout, pressure from above. Halden's world was contracting. When people lose control, they grasp for speed. That was dangerous. He found his daughter in a quiet corner with the junior clerk, coloring again. The clerk looked up, nervous smile in place. "She's explaining metadata to me," he said weakly. His daughter grinned. "It's like footprints," she said. "You can tell where someone walked even if they say they didn't." He smiled at that. "Exactly." He knelt beside her. "Tomorrow's going to be loud," he said gently. "But you don't have to stay if you don't want to." She thought about it, serious. "I want to see them listen." He nodded. "Okay." That night, sleep came in fragments. He replayed the sequence again and again, not because he doubted it, but because responsibility demanded repetition. Failure modes lived in the spaces people forgot to check. Morning broke clear and cold. The courthouse steps were already crowded when they arrived. Cameras, microphones, faces sharpened by expectation. He felt the weight of it but didn't absorb it. He'd carried heavier loads with less support. Inside, the gallery filled until there was nowhere left to stand. City officials sat stiffly, expressions neutral and strained. Halden arrived late, flanked by advisors, jaw tight, eyes already scanning exits. The judge entered. Silence fell. Proceedings began with foundation, jurisdiction, scope, authority, necessary scaffolding before weight could be applied. He waited, hands folded, posture loose but ready. When it was his turn again, he didn't speak immediately. He let the visuals work. Slide after slide of identical phrasing across supposedly independent reports. Time-stamped edits revealing coordination. Vendor access logs narrowing the field. The defense objected. Overruled. Halden whispered urgently to his counsel. It didn't help. The map was complete now. Anyone could follow it. He felt the shift then, not just in the room but beyond it. Phones lighting up. Messages traveling faster than spin could keep up. Public exposure wasn't a single moment. It was a cascade. The judge summarized without embellishment. Findings, referrals, recommendations. The language was clinical, devastating in its restraint. Halden stood again, voice raised. You're destroying livelihoods. The judge met his gaze. No, she said, you did. Security moved in closer, not to remove him, but to contain the outburst. The room held its breath. His daughter squeezed his hand, not in fear now, but solidarity. He squeezed back once. As the session ended, the judge made one final statement, voice carrying. This court will not be a tool for leverage against the vulnerable. Not now. Not again. That was the line, the one that would echo. Outside, the noise hit them full force. Questions shouted, cameras flashing. He guided his daughter through it, steady, unhurried. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Behind them, the courthouse doors closed on a reckoning that would keep unfolding long after today. He knew there would be consequences still, appeals, backlash, quiet retaliation attempts. Preparation didn't end with exposure. It evolved. But the hardest work was done. The truth had been placed where no amount of money or influence could fully erase it. And for the first time since this began, he felt something like certainty. Not about the system, about his place within it. The courthouse didn't empty the way it usually did. People lingered, clustered in knots, voices overlapping as if leaving too soon might mean missing something else, falling apart. He felt the tremor of it as he walked. Systems didn't collapse cleanly. They shed pieces. Security escorted Halden out through a side corridor. Not arrested, not yet, but watched. The distinction mattered. Power rarely vanished in a single motion. It eroded under pressure until it could no longer hold its shape. He stayed back, waiting until the noise thinned. His daughter sat beside him on a bench near the wall, legs swinging slowly. She watched people pass with an intensity that mirrored his own. Not curiosity, assessment. The judge emerged later than expected. No robe now, just a woman carrying the weight of what she'd set in motion. She paused when she saw him, then approached. "This won't be quick," she said quietly, "I know. There will be appeals, attempts to discredit, pressure." He nodded. "There always is." She studied him for a moment, then glanced at his daughter. She handled herself well. He felt a tightness in his chest ease slightly. She learned early how to be steady. The judge's expression softened. Just enough. "That steadiness changed the direction of this court," she said. "Don't underestimate that." She moved on before he could respond. Some things didn't need answers. Outside, the air buzzed with aftermath. News vans idled. Reporters argued into phones. Somewhere nearby, a generator hummed, feeding the hunger for coverage. He kept to the edges, guiding his daughter toward the quieter street that led home. Halfway down the block, someone called out, not a reporter. Halden. He stood near the curb, coat open, face drawn tight by something close to disbelief. No entourage now, no advisors, just a man watching the ground shift beneath him. "You didn't have to go that far," Halden said. He stopped, turning slowly. "I didn't go far," he replied. "I stood still." Halden laughed once, sharp and humorless. "You think this makes you righteous?" "No," he said. "It makes me accurate." The word landed harder than an insult. Halden's jaw clenched. "You've cost me years." "You cost yourself years," he said evenly, by assuming no one would check. Silence stretched. Cars passed. Somewhere, a siren wailed, distant and unconcerned. Halden looked at his daughter then, really looked. Something shifted in his expression, recognition too late to matter. "You could have taken a settlement," he muttered. Walked away comfortable. He felt his daughter's hand slip into his. He didn't look down. "Comfort isn't the same as safety," he said. Halden exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "You're not built for this world." He met his gaze. "I helped build it." That ended the conversation. Halden turned away, shoulders hunched. A man, suddenly unsure which parts of his life were still load-bearing. They walked on. At home, the quiet felt earned. He made tea while his daughter changed out of her courthouse clothes, humming softly to herself. Normal sounds, anchors. They sat at the table together, steam curling between them. She traced the rim of her mug thoughtfully. "Is it really over?" He considered the question carefully. "The part where they pretended nothing was wrong is over." She nodded, satisfied with that. Later, after she'd gone to bed, he opened his notebook one last time. Not to add evidence, but to close loops. He crossed out arrows, boxed conclusions, made notes for people who would come asking soon. Investigators, auditors, journalists who wanted clarity instead of spectacle. This was the quiet work, the part no one filmed. His phone buzzed with a message from the junior clerk. "They're calling it unprecedented." He typed back. It was overdue. He set the phone aside and looked around the small kitchen. Worn table, chipped counter, a drawing taped crookedly to the fridge. This was what he'd been protecting all along. Not an idea of justice, not a reputation. A life. Outside, rain started again, light and steady, washing residue from the street. He listened to it, letting the rhythm settle him. Tomorrow, the world would argue about what had happened. Spin it. Reduce it. Inflate it. But the truth was already locked in record, anchored by facts that didn't bend to narrative. He closed the notebook and slid it into the drawer, not hidden, just stored. Tools didn't need ceremony. As he turned off the light, one thought surfaced, clear and unshakable. They hadn't laughed today, and they never would again. The next days unfolded with a strange calm, the kind that followed storms once the damage was already done. Headlines multiplied, each one louder than the last, but inside the courthouse the mood was restrained, almost careful. People spoke precisely now. Files were handled with visible intent. The system had learned briefly to be afraid of being wrong. He returned to work because that was what he did. The building still needed maintaining. Lights still burned out. Doors still stuck. Pipes still rattled in the walls like old bones. Power didn't pause just because it had been exposed. Some people avoided him entirely. Others nodded, awkward, unsure what respect was supposed to look like in practice. A few stopped him outright, thanking him in low voices, and as if gratitude itself might be overheard and punished. He accepted none of it as payment. He accepted it as confirmation. The junior clerk met him near the maintenance desk mid-morning, eyes bright with exhaustion. "They've opened 3 parallel investigations," he said. "Procurement, consulting practices, judicial interference." "That's thorough," he replied. "It's messy." "Truth usually is." The clerk hesitated. "They asked if you'd testify again." He nodded. "If they need it." "They also asked if you wanted something else, recognition, reinstatement, a title." He considered that for a moment, then shook his head. "I have a job." The clerk smiled faintly, relieved. At home, life resumed its quieter patterns. His daughter went back to school without watchers lurking at the gates. Teachers spoke to him with care instead of suspicion. One apologized, not dramatically, just honestly. He accepted it the same way he accepted most things, with a nod and forward motion. One afternoon, the judge's assistant called, not for testimony, for information. The judge wanted clarification on an old audit detail, something only he could explain cleanly. He went after work, stayed an hour, answered questions, left without ceremony. As he stood to go, the judge looked at him. "You understand," she said, "this changed more than one case." "Yes." "It reminded people that institutions aren't abstract," she continued. "They're built from choices." He met her gaze, and maintained. She smiled at that briefly. Outside, reporters still waited, but fewer now. Attention moved on when it couldn't extract novelty. That was fine. Accountability didn't require an audience forever, just long enough to take root. Halden's name appeared again, this time attached to subpoenas and board resignations. Not prison yet. That would take time. But the illusion of invulnerability had collapsed, and the market was less forgiving than courts ever were. His daughter followed the updates with a seriousness that surprised him. One night at dinner she asked, "Do you think they'll do it again?" "Someone will," he said honestly. "But not the same way." "Why?" "Because now they know what it looks like when someone checks." That answer seemed to settle something in her. She smiled and went back to her food. Late one evening, he stood in the courthouse after hours, fixing a light above the main entrance. The building was quiet, stripped of its daily performance. Just stone and wiring and history. He tightened the last screw, tested the switch. Light bloomed cleanly. From up there, he could see the courtroom doors down the hall. Closed now. Ordinary. He thought about the laughter from that first day, how casual it had been. How confident. He didn't feel anger about it anymore, just clarity. People laughed because they'd been trained to confuse appearance with worth. Systems reinforced that confusion because it was convenient. None of it was personal. That didn't make it harmless, but it made it predictable. He climbed down, packed his tools, and locked the cabinet. The notebook stayed in the drawer at home. It had done its job. As he stepped outside, the air was cool, clean. The city moved around him, unaware of the small adjustments that had kept it from tipping further off balance, and that was always the way. Maintenance was invisible when done right. His phone buzzed once, a message from the junior clerk. They're rewriting procedures. He typed back, "Good." He walked toward the bus stop, hands in his pockets, shoulders relaxed. Tomorrow would look a lot like today. Work, school, dinner, ordinary things. But underneath that ordinariness, something had shifted. A recalibration. A reminder etched quietly into record and memory alike. The court had laughed once. It wouldn't forget why it stopped. The courthouse returned to routine the way a body returns to breathing after a scare, automatically but with new awareness. Schedules resumed, dockets filled, the machine kept moving. Only now, people noticed the gears. He walked the familiar corridors one last time that week, toolbox in hand, listening to the building speak in its small, honest ways. A loose hinge, a flickering light. Nothing dramatic, just reminders that everything powerful still relied on maintenance. His daughter waited for him at the front steps, backpack slung over one shoulder, hair pulled back in a hurry. School had gone back to normal, too. That mattered more than any headline. She waved when she saw him, face bright, unguarded. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded. "Can we walk?" They did, past the courthouse, past the reporters who no longer lingered, past the place where laughter had once echoed louder than truth. The city moved around them, unaware of how close it had come to believing the wrong version of itself. At a crosswalk, she stopped suddenly. "Do you think the judge knew," she asked, "that she'd remember your name?" He considered it. "I think she knew she had to listen." That answer seemed to satisfy her. She stepped forward when the light changed, trusting the signal the way people trusted systems, because most days they worked. At home, life settled into rhythm again. Homework at the table, dinner cooking on the stove, a drawing taped to the fridge, crooked but proud. He watched her explain fractions out loud to herself, hands moving as if shaping invisible pieces. That night, after she went to bed, he sat alone with a cup of tea, the quiet stretching without tension. The notebook stayed in the drawer. It belonged to the past now, not hidden, just complete. Messages still came in occasionally, journalists asking for comment, advocacy groups asking him to speak, former colleagues reaching out, some with gratitude, some with guilt. He answered a few, declined most. He'd learned that attention was a tool like any other, useful only when applied deliberately. The junior clerk sent one final update. The firm had dissolved under investigation. Policies were changing. Training mandates rewritten. Oversight expanded. He replied with a single word. Good. That was enough. Days passed. Weeks. The story faded from feeds, replaced by newer outrages, louder scandals. That was how the world worked. Memory was short unless someone maintained it. He maintained what mattered. One evening, as rain traced soft lines down the window, his daughter curled beside him on the couch. "They won't laugh again, right?" she asked. He thought about it carefully. "Someone will," he said honestly. "Somewhere." She frowned. "That's not fair." "No," he agreed. "But now you know what to do when it happens." She looked up at him. "Stand." "Yes," he said, "and check the details." She smiled at that, a small knowing smile, and rested her head against his shoulder. Outside, the city hummed. Lights flickered on and off as timers engaged. Systems adjusted quietly, invisibly, because someone had designed them to respond to reality instead of assumption. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt aligned. The court had laughed once because it mistook humility for ignorance and power for correctness. It had stopped laughing when faced with something simpler and harder to ignore. Truth, placed carefully where everyone could see it. That was the real lesson. Not about courts, not about judges, about how dignity survived when someone refused to trade it for silence. He turned off the lamp and sat in the dark a moment longer, listening to the rain, letting the day end properly. "Before we move on, tell me the title of the next story you want to hear. Subscribe and don't miss our next story. Rejected on a Christmas blind date. This single dad never expected what one woman whispered next. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, What injustice should we tackle next?